This right here is one of the most powerful gimmicks in all of Magic, and today I'm going to tell you the secret. Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another tutorial video, and I'm excited for this one because today I'm going to talk about one of the most powerful, invisible, and versatile gimmicks in all of Magic. As well as teaching you exactly how this gimmick works, of course, I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons of it because I do think there are some things that are wrong with this gimmick. Now, perhaps some of you watching already know which gimmick I'm talking about, but if you don't, you're actually looking at the gimmick right now. It is in this video currently, and I've hidden it in plain sight, which is a perfect example of how this gimmick is used. And if you don't know what I'm talking about this. Because this right here is a thumb tip. This is essentially plastic molded to look like my thumb. It's completely hollow, it's super simple, and yeah, maybe some of you watching this already know about thumb tips and you're not a big fan of them. You think they should just be chucked in the bin because they're useless bits of plastic. And I respect that opinion, but I know a good gimmick when I see one, and I'm a fan of thumb tips. And once again, to prove how invisible they are, I've actually been wearing two the entire time, and I bet you didn't notice. Seriously, rewind the video. I was wearing two the whole time. If that doesn't prove how invisible and how under the radar this gimmick is, I don't know what will. It's just one of those things that spectators never will see. And even if they know about thumb tips, and we'll cover exactly why they might know about thumb tips, they still don't catch on. I have been fooled by thumb tips. That's how powerful they are. I remember at Blackpool a few years ago, I was showed this trick, absolutely incredible, and at the end I was told it used one of these. And the whole time I'd been looking at this gimmick that I was so familiar with, that over the years I have owned dozens of, and I still didn't know that it was being used right in front of my face. To give you a list of some of the effects that are possible, you can make things appear, you can make things disappear, you can make things teleport, you can make things restore, you can switch, you can load, you can ditch, you can do unbelievable amounts with just a little bit of plastic. So buckle in, sit back and relax, and welcome to this video all about the trusty thumb tip. It's worth understanding that there are a lot of tricks you can do with thumb tips. I don't know the exact number of tricks, and I don't think anyone does, but it's probably hundreds. So much so that there are literally books written just on the subject of thumb tip magic. I'll link some of those down below because I think they're worth checking out if you're interested in this topic. There are also two main types of thumb tip before we begin. This is a soft one, and this is a hard one. Get your mind out the gutters. Personally, I prefer the hard molded plastic one, the sort of rigid one, but you can go for the sort of soft, like silicone style ones if you want. Again, that is something that you'll just have to choose, so have a play around, get some different sizes and different types, and find the one that fits best. And I say fits best, but I should say works best, because you don't want the thumb tip to be perfectly snug around your thumb. Like for instance with mine, you can see there's quite a lot of wiggle room. It's not a tight fit. It shouldn't be an exact copy of your thumb that fits over the top. It should have room inside, because you're going to store objects inside here when you're vanishing and appearing and switching and whatever. That's the use of it. It conceals the object so that you're able to show your hands apparently empty, and actually there's an object hidden inside your thumb. It's just like a superpower. At this point, if you're new to the idea of thumb tips or you've never played around with them, you're probably thinking that it's fairly obvious when I do this where the thumb tip is. Like, it's clearly here, right? It stands out, no pun intended, like a sore thumb. That's a terrible joke, I'm sorry, but it really does. It stands out like a sore thumb and everyone can see what it is. But that's because you know what you're looking for, and this is something that I really struggled with when I first came across thumb tips. I was like, I'm not going to perform with a thumb tip, it's so obvious, everyone's going to see it. But think back to the start of the video where I was literally holding a thumb tip like this whilst wearing another thumb tip, and you didn't see it. No one's going to expect you to have a fake thumb on. They're not going to be looking out for it, therefore they're not going to see it. Some magicians have said that theoretically the thumb tip could be painted bright pink and your audience still wouldn't be able to see it, because your hands are going to be in motion, you're going to be covering and concealing your thumb as much as is naturally possible, and you're also going to be picking up objects, moving stuff around and behaving naturally. And the one thing you're not going to do is look at your thumb. You're not going to look at it because why would you do that anyway? A quick little display that you can do to show your hands empty is just what I did then. Just a quick show with your thumb pointing directly at the audience. And when it's head on like this, it's harder to tell that it is a thumb tip, but do not do what I'm doing here and pause for ages, because the longer you stay there, the more likely it is they're gonna see the thumb tip. So just a quick display and always be natural. So the trick I'm gonna teach you is the vanishing salt. It's one of my favorites, and it's just that little bit more impossible, because rather than just making one object disappear, you're making loads of little objects disappear, being the grains of salt. I'm gonna start with the thumb tip on my right hand, and I'm also going to hold the salt in my right hand. And what this does is it provides extra cover for the thumb tip. Like I say, if you can hide the thumb tip, then you should as much as is naturally possible. This also allows me to show my left hand completely empty, which is really nice. But now in order to show my right hand empty, I'm going to transfer the salt over and show my right hand empty. And you'll notice something here, because I'm not wearing the thumb tip, and I'm not wearing it on this hand either. So where did the thumb tip go? Well, I've done something interesting. I've actually clipped it behind the salt, and this gets it into the perfect position for something that we'll need later. But just going over that move again, I'm wearing it on my right hand, I also have the salt on my right hand, and essentially what I'm going to do, as I grab the salt, I'm going to grab around my thumb, clip with the left hand around that thumb tip. As I take the salt, I'm going to remove the thumb tip so that now it is here. It's quite a nice move, it just happens really, really naturally. So you're holding it like so, you come across with the left hand, you move the salt to your left hand, and you've also moved the thumb tip behind the salt. So now I can show this hand empty, I take the salt back, and as I do this, my left hand is going to curl in a fist around the thumb tip so that the opening of the thumb tip is pointing up as it should be from that position. Now I take the salt and I'm going to pour it into my hand. And the amount that you pour is not a specific amount. I can't tell you how much salt to pour. That's just something you're going to have to play around with in practice. Every thumb tip is different, every performer is different, but my advice is pour as slowly as possible so it looks like more salt than it is. If you pour too much salt in, you're not going to be able to get your thumb back in the thumb tip, which is ultimately what we want to do. But if you don't pour enough, it's just kind of a lame trick. Like, you made a few granules of salt disappear, so what? So you want it to be an impressive amount of salt, but not too much that it makes the trick difficult. So pour slowly, and this is the amount of salt I pour. I make sure there's a solid stream, like so, and I pour the salt in. That should be a good amount. I can, if I want, brush the excess particles away, and this gives me quite a nice excuse for a move I'm going to do in a second. But as I'm brushing the particles away, I really want them to focus on the fist. At this point, all attention is on the fist, which is really where the dirty work is. That's where the thumb tip is, but they can't see that. And the opening around the sort of thumb and index finger, that should be as tight as possible, and you really should try and act as if you are keeping a fistful of salt. So in your practice, without the thumb tip, just know what it feels like to have a fistful of salt and how that shapes your hand and how that makes your hand look, because that's what you're replicating. And if you get that wrong, if you're just kind of like this, pouring salt in, well, obviously the salt would come out the bottom. So you need to think about that. You need to have a tight grip on this salt. Now I come across with my thumb, and in order to make the salt vanish, obviously, I'm going to need to put my thumb back in the thumb tip and take the thumb tip away, leaving an empty fist. That's how the salt disappears. But I can't just do that, because it's really obvious I'm taking something away. So I'm going to disguise that with a bigger action that hides the smaller action. Kind of looks a little bit like this. And this is what it looks like in slow motion. As I'm turning, my thumb goes inside the thumb tip, and then it tilts. And I'm now just wearing the thumb tip normally. That drops to my side, I'm leaving an empty fist. This disappears. So at full speed, imagining that I've just poured the salt and put this down, that's all it is. And at this point, I've actually loaded the thumb tip into the other hand. So the way I've done this, I was just wearing the thumb tip like so. My fingers come across, grab that, and my thumb lifts out. Super simple move, and it just loads the thumb tip one-handed into a similar fist position. So it disappears here while I'm loading it into this fist, and then I can come across and show that the salt has teleported. It's a brilliant vanish, and then a brilliant reappearance. And I like to make that as high as possible, just again so that they're seeing more salt fall, and that makes it look like a bigger amount of salt. Once that's done, I can then reload the thumb tip back onto the thumb if I want, or more likely, the thumb tip's just gonna go into a pocket so that I'm left completely clean, and at that point, you have a handful of salt. So, that is the basic handling of the trick. Let's talk about the cons, because the thumb tip has some issues that really need addressing. I can't really make a video about thumb tips without talking about some of the negatives and why some magicians really don't consider it a valuable prop. Because the thumb tip is what I would consider a mainstream method. And by that I mean it's a method that is easily accessible by the average audience member. Anyone could walk into a toy shop, pick up a kid's magic kit, and there's a high probability that it will have a thumb tip inside there, along with a Svengali deck, probably. Those are two ultimate mainstream effects, and if you know me, you know that I perform Svengali deck magic quite a lot. I actually really rate the Svengali deck. I've done a whole masterclass series on the Svengali deck. I love it, and I think it's great. But it's mainstream, and I understand that some audience members I perform the Svengali deck to will know what a Svengali deck is, and so it's my job to use it in a way where they don't recognise it's a Svengali deck. It will be in their knowledge, it will be in their sphere that sometimes magicians use fake plastic thumbs. I've had it at magic gigs where people have gone, "Ah, yeah, show us a trick," but none of that fake plastic thumb stuff. In fact, there's another magician I'm aware of who I won't name in case they don't want their secrets about thumb tips out there, but they were talking about an experience of using thumb tips, and a spectator said a very similar thing. They said, "Oh, my son does magic and he has these like fake plastic thumbs, so don't go using any of that nonsense." And then they went straight into performing a trick with a thumb tip to this spectator who just said that, and the spectator didn't notice that it was a thumb tip. I showed this to my girlfriend in advance of making this video just to get a layperson's opinion on a very weird looking method, and I said, "What do you think this is used for?" And her initial guess, quite rightly, was, well, it's a trick where it looks like you've pulled your thumb off. You know, that's just what people think this is for. I imagine there's been quite a few kids who have got a magic kit, not really read the instructions, and used the thumb tip for that very effect of pretending that they're pulling their thumb off. And honestly, fair enough, because it looks like that. It's molded like that. It looks like a realistic thumb. Why does it look like a realistic thumb though? Because like I said, it could be bright pink, it could be anything. And actually, one of the things I really dislike about thumb tips is the detailed molding. This one's really ridiculous. It's got like a fake fingerprint or thumbprint on the back of it, and then a nail and a knuckle, and it doesn't need any of that. If ever you've performed with a thumb tip, you'll know that orientation doesn't matter. You don't have to have your nail inside the bit with the nail on and your thumbprint next to the thumbprint bit. And the final limitation, the final problem I want to talk about with regards to thumb tips is the colour. Now, this one right here is a pretty good match for my skin colour. Maybe it's a little bit darker, but basically it's the same colour. This one has been used quite a lot and has sort of got browner over the years, but again, basically it's the same colour. And that's where the issue comes in. Because if you search up thumb tips online or on a magic dealer or on Amazon or wherever, they're pretty much all this colour, which means there are incredibly limited options for people with darker skin than this skin colour. Now, I'm sure there are some good solutions out there, but not nearly enough, so magic community, it's time that we fix that problem, get on it and have some proper customization and options for people with different skin tones. So there we go, that is my video on the trusty thumb tip, the thumb tip that has become the staple of so many repertoires, of so many magicians. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, And if you did, more than ever, now is a good time to say give a thumbs up on the video. And if you've made it to this point of the video, make sure to subscribe down below if you like anything to do with magic. If you're a magician or you want to be a magician, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a future video, and I'll catch you in the next one.